too long gaze. The light of the spotlights dazzled the studio room filled with crowds of the crew. Even so, LiuYuning still stood quietly in the position that the director had set. Her eyes did not escape from one point. It was Zuer who was talking to the makeup artist. To outsiders, it might just be an ordinary look. But for those who knew LiuYuning, it wasn't just a blank look. That was Yuning's way of reading someone. And Zuer was the only person who always kept him too long silent in his own thoughts. Filming that day went smoothly, but the atmosphere behind the scenes is felt tense. Not because of the bickering, but because of the hanging atmosphere. LiuYuning and Zuer are two big stars with high professionalism. But who knows since when, things have started to creep in between the dialogue and the script. And all the crew felt it. The silent language. They rarely talk during breaks. There was no loose laughter like the rest of the actors' colleagues. But LiuYuning always knew when Zuer was exhausted. He would ask the staff to bring hot tea to him without saying much. Instead, Zuer would stand silently behind the monitor as LiuYuning performed an emotional scene. His hands clenched into fists, but his face was calm. He knew how hard it was for Yuning to cry in front of the camera, because Yuning kept everything to herself too often. In their world, professionalism is a must. But the feeling that builds up slowly like fog is not visible, but makes the air so heavy. The scene is too real. That day, they were asked to do a heavy scene confrontation scene that would determine the emotional peak of the drama they starred in. In the script, Zuer's character had to hit Yuning's character's chest and cry, expressing disappointment, heartache, and unrequited love. When filming began, everything went according to the script. But then, Zuer's voice broke in the middle of the scene, and her tears flowed more profusely than the script had arranged. He did not stop when the director shouted, "Cut!" And LiuYuning, who was supposed to remain standing firm, instead clasped Zuer's hand secretly. He didn't know what to say. In his eyes, it wasn't acting. It was a real wound. Gossip that cannot be suppressed. That night, one of the staff shared a candid photo of them during a break. Yuning appeared to be staring at Zuer, who was asleep on a lounger, while the blanket Zuer was wearing belonged to Yuning. In a matter of hours, the photo was widespread and trending. The media began to guess. Is there something between them? The agency immediately issued a statement. Their relationship was very professional and respectful. But the public doesn't just believe it. Because what is seen is not a scandal but something deeper than just togetherness. Unspoken boundaries. They began to keep their distance. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much. LiuYuning refused a joint interview, and Zuer began to avoid dual promotional activities. In one of the behind the scenes, Yuning was seen glancing at Zuer, who was sitting not far from her. He wanted to say hello, but just lowered his head and opened the script, pretending to read. Zuer, who was aware of it, only took a deep breath and smiled a small smile that never reached his eyes. When everything gets too quiet, a staff editor testifies. They laughed together. But after that scene of confrontation, everything changed. It felt like something had broken, but they chose to leave the pieces scattered on the floor. There was no quarrel. There is no open drama. There are only two people who are too good at restraint and too afraid to cross the line between professionalism and personal feelings. Fall in silence. Days go by. The drama is approaching its final episode. While the public continues to praise their chemistry, LiuYuning and Zuer are seen less and less together. That night, however, something broke between the silences. Filming was taking place late at night. The weather's getting worse. Heavy rains washed away the location. The crew began to complain. The atmosphere became tense. Zuer, whose body tends to be sensitive to cold, looked shivering while filming the rainy scene outdoors. LiuYuning, without thinking, took off his jacket and enveloped him before the director even realized the circumstances. He didn't say anything. Zuer only nodded slowly, holding back a small sob held back by the sound of the rain. Some of the crew saw it, but no one dared to comment on it. When the scene was over, they sat together in a corner of the tent, silent to each other. No talking. Only the breath and heartbeat of each are clearly audible. And maybe it's the way they talk to each other when words are no longer safe enough. Sometimes we can fall for each other, even when trying to stand up straight as professionals, Zuer says softly, almost inaudibly. Yuning turned her head slowly, and for a moment, the boundary between character and reality was no longer clear. He wanted to grab her hand but held back. Again, the line is too thin. And it's too painful to cross. Anonymous letter. A few days later, Zuer found a small envelope tucked between his scripts. No name, no signature. Just neat handwriting on a small piece of paper. I know we live in a world that demands distance. But every time you laugh, I feel like the world is a little lighter. If I can't be with you off camera, let me love you in silence, behind a script, between scenes. Zuer read it 3 times. His hands were shaking. He knew who the author was, even though his name was not written. That day, she cried alone in the dressing room. Not because he was sad, but because he felt the same way. It's just, they are both too afraid of the world outside the camera. The never-ending. The last day of filming arrived. The atmosphere is full of excitement. The crew gave hugs one by one. The director gave thanks. However, LiuYuning and Zuer, no hugging. They just stood opposite each other in a small hallway behind the stage. Their eyes met each other. Old. Inside. Thank you, Zuer said finally. You're welcome, Yuning replied. It's been part of this story. There was a pause. And part of my life, he continued quietly. Very slowly. Almost swallowed by the cold studio air conditioning wind. Zuer just smiled. His eyes are watering. But she didn't cry. Then they walked in different directions. Not looking at each other. Because if one looks, maybe everything will collapse. Life after the camera goes out. A few weeks after the drama aired, the media kept asking about their closeness. Both remain professional. No statement, no confession. However, fans of Jelly. They realized Zuer started wearing a simple black bracelet of male models on several occasions. LiuYuning has been caught on camera wearing a similar bracelet. In an interview, LiuYuning was asked, "Do you believe love can grow quietly, even in a world full of highlights?" He was silent long enough. Then answer, "I believe that some of the strongest loves must be kept in silence. Because true love does not always need to be announced." Zuer was also, in a different interview, asked about the fondest memories of his last project. "Someone's gaze, which makes me feel understood, even when I don't say anything." Between professionalism and feelings, the story of LiuYuning and Zuer is not an ordinary love story. This is a story about 2 great actors who love their work and maybe also love each other, but choose not to call it love. Because their world is full of rules, full of highlights, and they don't want to lose each other just for daring to go too far. They never say, "I love you." But every look, every little gesture, every nameless letter is proof that love is alive. Even if it can only beat quietly behind the scenes. Final words between the limits of professionalism and feelings. LiuYuning and Zuer prove that not all stories have to be announced to feel real. Sometimes, the most powerful love is the one that cannot be mentioned, can only be felt. And perhaps, that's what makes this story timeless.